On today's show, the Hawks have played 10% of their schedule this year. Plenty to talk about after 8 games, plus an injury update on Trae Young and DeAndre Hunter, and a little bit of a preview of Hawks Knicks on Wednesday. We'll get into all of that and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1839 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Tuesday evening. It's election day here in early November, and today's podcast is sponsored by the folks at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. I also want to encourage you, as I always do, at the top of the show, to make us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Check us out and subscribe to the podcast anywhere you find your podcasts. We're on Apple and Spotify. On the audio side, we are also on YouTube. Please like this video as you are watching it and subscribe on your favorite podcast platforms of choice across the board, audio and video, if that would be pleasing to you at this point in time. Also, I should say at the top of the show as well, the Locked On Podcast Network now has daily newsletters, including one for us here at Locked On Hawks. It has both team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox every day. Sign up for free right now at lockedondaily.com. And today's show, we'll be diving into the Hawks after 8 games. 10% of the schedule has been played now for Atlanta. We're in between games now. The whole league is off as I record this podcast on Tuesday for Election Day. The Hawks, of course, lost last night. If you missed it, I did my normal deep dive into that game on Monday, as well as the game that the Hawks actually won on Sunday in New Orleans. And it's been a very busy time on the podcast. If you're a new listener, welcome aboard. But there's plenty to catch up on if you want to go ahead and do that to help the podcast. Also, sort of add to your Hawk space of background information, et cetera, et cetera. But on today's podcast, it'll be mostly your mailbag questions, but some topical ones on purpose as we kind of dive into how the Hawks have looked through their first 8 games of the season. Also, I will share some audio later on in the podcast from Quinn Snyder talking about Jalen Johnson. And at the end of the show, some injury updates and a little bit of a preview of Hawks Knicks on Wednesday as the Hawks get back into action. And as a spoiler for a little bit later on, it actually was a positive injury report for the Hawks on Tuesday. A rarity these days around this Hawks team, but a pretty encouraging report that we'll dive into later on with regard to Trae Young and DeAndre Hunter, etc. First, though, let's dive in now to your questions. And by the way, if you ever want to send a question into the podcast, you can do so a number of different ways, I would say. You can send them via email at lockedonhawks@gmail.com. That's lockedonhawks@gmail.com. Also, send them to me on Twitter/X. I am at BT Rowland. The show account is at Locked On Hawks. Also, if you want to subscribe on my Patreon, it's patreon.com/BT Rowland. And always taking questions. I don't always put out like calls for them, but I will bank some. People just ask questions that I think are interesting, and I'll kind of add them to the list. So always welcoming that. And we'll dive in now to the first one on today's show from David, who says, I don't know exactly what I expected this season, but it was not a 3-5 start. What would you have projected in the first 8 games before the season began, and how would that have been different due to the Hawks' injuries? So a good way to frame this now, and a good question from David, obviously, is to get into kind of the broader analysis of the first 10% of the season, because that's what it is. Again, 8 out of 82, 10%. And to answer this kind of plainly, I've got to go back and talk about what my thought process would have been coming into the season in mid-October, pre-injuries, all that stuff. And what I would say for the first 8 games exactly, I get why this happened, but even if I tried to kind of warn people a little bit against that coming into the season, but a lot of people were just assuming flat out the Hawks were going to open 4-1 because they had a pretty easy schedule to open the season. And that's definitely true. They had 4 games that they were definitely going to be favored in the first 5. And I will say this now, and I said this back then as well, you just don't win every game that you're supposed to win in the NBA. Nor do you lose every game that you're supposed to lose. There's always volatility there. So I think the most likely / probabilistic outcome of the first 5 games would have been a 3-2 record rather than a 4-1 record. Again, the Hawks were a big underdog in Oklahoma City. That made sense that when you lose far more often, I should say, than you actually win. But even if you thought the Hawks were going to be like a huge 75% favorite against the Nets, the Hornets, and the Wizards twice, by the way, that's very aggressive. But even if you said that, you don't win all 4 of those games very often. It's combined probability. Like you don't going 4-0 in those games, even as an 80% favorite, is not a likely outcome. So I would say more often than not, you win 3 of those 4, and that puts you at 3-2. Obviously, the Hawks did not go through 3-2. Keep that in mind, but they probably would have been my projection through 5 games. Then you have the stretch, of course, of the Kings at home on Friday, the Pelicans on the road on Sunday, and then home for Boston on a back-to-back with travel on Monday. I would say the most likely outcome coming into the season of those 3 games was probably 1-2, maybe like 1.5 wins, but 1-2 because of the Boston game looming at the end of it. Ironically, the Hawks did exactly that, and they went 1-2. I would have said the Kings game was their most favorable game coming into the year because it was at home. Whereas in reality, it actually became the Pelicans game that they won, and also that they were favored in the most because of their own injuries and also New Orleans injuries, as they were missing a ton of guys in that game. And then as I sort of talked about a little bit on yesterday's show on Monday, you have basically a schedule loss on Monday. Boston is Boston, and also the advantages that were built into that game. That was a really, really, really bad spot for Atlanta. So if you add that up, you probably get 4-4 as the most likely probabilistic outcome for the Hawks. Obviously, that doesn't mean that we're supposed to go 4-4 every time, but some of those are 5-3, some of those are 3-5, et cetera, et cetera. I would have probably said the most single likely outcome would have been 4-4, and the Hawks are 3-5. So that's not great. Obviously, that's not where you want to be, but that wouldn't have inspired anybody. At the same time, I also would have said 4-3 before the Boston game, which feels better than 4-4. At the same time, there you go. Now the Hawks underperformed that, obviously, but they could have been better and gone 5-3 or whatever. They were only real underdogs in 2 of the first 8 games, but they also faced probably the 2 best teams in the league right now in those first 2 games. In Oklahoma City on the road and then Boston at home. So I think injuries, I would say, heavily account for the Hawks going 3-5 compared to being 4-4 or even 5-3 at this point in time. There is nuance here, and that there are definitely things the Hawks have not done very well. And if you listen to the podcast regularly, you will know that I always talk about what the Hawks do well and what they don't do well in these certain games and breaking them down. And you can't blame injuries for all of it. I'm not doing that. At the same time, you do have to account for part of the reason why, like, for instance, the most proper example I would say is I don't believe the Hawks would have lost twice to the Wizards if they were anything approaching full strength. Could they have lost? Yes. But if you ask me right now, how much of a part do injuries play in both those games going the wrong direction, I would say a pretty big part, frankly. And they were also cluster injuries, which I've talked about a lot already in the season, but when they're at the same position on the perimeter, it's harder to withstand. For example, the Hawks are 3-3 with Dyson Daniels available, and they're 0-2 without him. And now that's not a huge coincidence by any means, nor does it tell you that it's always going to be that way, but he's a very valuable player on this roster. And right now, also, there's only one guy on the entire team that has a big positive in the on-off differential, and it's DeAndre Hunter, who's only played in 2 of the first 8 games. So they've had some injury issues. That's undeniable. Every team has injuries, but the Hawks have had worse than usual injuries so far. That's fair to say. So maybe to wrap this up a little bit, if you said the Hawks were going to be projected to win like 4.5 games out of the first 8 on average, that would have made sense to me if they were close to full strength. That then probably dips to 3 or 3.5 wins with the injuries that they've had so far. And trust me, I do understand people are frustrated. That makes total sense. I had someone say today, and they weren't trolling. They were just saying, when I talked about how the Hawks were 3-5, they were said, wow, it feels worse than that. It feels like 1-7. And I joke about that sometimes because Hawks fans kind of get that doomsday aura sometimes about the way the team's playing. And I get it. It's not been a fun 3-5. There have been, it feels worse than that in some respects. I totally get that because of the injuries, et cetera. And also the 2 Wizards losses were certainly not received very well by the fans for obvious reasons. But there are exactly 2 teams right now, as I'm recording this podcast on Tuesday, 2 teams in the entire Eastern Conference that are over 500. One more time. There are 15 teams in the East. 2 of them are over 500 right now. 2 of them. That means that everything is still on the table for the Hawks. In fact, there are only 5 teams that are 500 right now or better. The Hawks are exactly one game out of the 3 seed right now, despite all the challenges. And they're going to get a little bit healthier, of course, hopefully starting as early as Wednesday, but it seems like pretty healthy, at least healthy-ish coming up in the future. And, the season is very much alive. All of their goals are still on the table. They're not 0-8. They're 3-5. And yeah, that's a little bit under where you would would have wanted them to be coming into the year. But there's a reason why I talked about this on that podcast. The Pelicans win was a big one, not only because you just needed a win, but just from a vibe standpoint to avoid losing 5-6 games in a row, et cetera, et cetera. And the Hawks are now in okay shape. It doesn't mean that everything is rainbows. I will not tell you that otherwise. I'm not going to lie to you ever on the podcast. I will give you what I think, and I'll give you the nuance and the context. But overall, through 8 games, the Hawks have underperformed, but I think a lot of that is due to injury. And as far as how the team's actually played, adjusting for that, they've been okay. They haven't been great. They haven't been terrible. They've been okay. And then the downgrade for the injuries, and here you are at 3-5. But we'll see how they perform moving forward. Hopefully that's a good sort of encapsulation of how things have gone so far in the first 8 games / 10% of the season. All right, we'll dive in more in a second to your mailbag questions, and there are more of them, I promise you. But first, a word from our partners on the show. Today's show is brought to you by HIMS, and things are important in life, but your schedule is also busy. Maybe you don't actually have time to go to a doctor's office to get treated for ED. Through HIMS, though, you can get a personalized and convenient ED treatment without stepping foot outside of your door. HIMS is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. HIMS also provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints, as well as Viagra and Cialis, and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for those uncomfortable doctor's visits that nobody really enjoys. Plus, you can just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option for you. If prescribed, your medication will ship directly to you in discreet packaging for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything that you need, from treatments to ongoing care. From hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, HIMS can help you find the ED treatment that works best for you. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. One more time, that is hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See the website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. All right, question from Mike, who says, can you talk about Jalen Johnson's performance so far this season? He has played better lately, but I was concerned about what I saw early after the contract extension. This is the question, Mike, as always. Jalen, in the first 3 games of the season, shot about 30% from the field, and about 1/3 of his shots from 2-point range went in. He had more turnovers than assists in the first 3 games. It was a tough start for him, to be sure. He was passive in those outings to begin the season. He kind of just like out of sorts a little bit. He had usage rate below 23% in all 3 games. He looked kind of uncomfortable to me at that point in time, but I urged patience, number one. And since then, in the last 5 games, he's averaging 22.6 points, 10.8 rebounds, and 6.4 assists per game. That's obviously monstrous numbers through 5 games. He's not shooting well from 3. And I did say this a little bit last year. I am still not convinced that Jalen's 3-point shooting accuracy last year, where he actually ended up shooting about 36%. I'm not sure that's entirely real. I do think that he's better than he's been so far this year, but I'm actually encouraged maybe not encouraged, but interested to see where he actually lands as a 3-point shooter. But that hasn't gone well so far, but he is over 60% on 2s in the last 5 games. Also much more aggressive overall in recent days. His usage rate, which I said before, was 23% or less in all 3 of the first 3 games, has now been 25% or more in 4 of the last 5. He's attacking the rim more. He isn't settling as much. There's still some frustrating like fadeaway jump shots where he kind of forgets that he has a huge advantage athletically and size-wise sometimes, but he's been a little bit more clear in asserting himself more clearly through that. We did see a little bit on Monday. I thought he got a little bit tired on Monday, and I think Quinn talked about that a little bit after the game as well. Not just him, but he kind of stopped attacking as much as the Hawks kind of let go of the rope a little bit on Monday. But when he's been more engaged, you can see the results. He's been pretty impressive this season. They're also leaning on him quite a bit this year. They were always going to be doing that, but even more so with the injuries. He is currently, as we're talking right now on Tuesday, leading the entire NBA in total minutes with 291. By the way, Trae's number 2. So the Hawks have been pushing pretty hard. Now, some of that is because they played 8 games, and not everybody has, but they're also both in the top 15 in minutes per game. So they're pushing a lot of minutes right now. 36.5 or so per game for Jalen so far. And that's not an accident given the absence of Hunter. Like, I know that Hunter isn't like a perfect option behind him, but Hunter was going to be their, I think, primary backup 4 coming into the year. He's been out for a while now, and there's just been a lot of Jalen for obvious reasons. Like when your options are David Roddy, who's undersized and under athletic on defense in particular, and then Larry Nance, who the Hawks don't want to use there, it seems like at this point in time, it becomes a lot of Jalen. And by the way, there's a reason why. For reference, the Hawks currently have a minus 16.8 net rating when Jalen is off the court this year. So basically, they are the worst team in the league by a wide margin when Jalen is on the bench. Now, it's a tiny sample size. That's like 90 minutes, but that is really, really bad. And also the biggest split by far of any player on the team. Even bigger than Trae. For a long time, it's been, all right, can they survive the non-Trae minutes? That is still a storyline that I'll be tracking all year long, and that's still a concern. But this year so far, it's been, can they survive without Jalen? Even more than Trae with the current personnel. Now, when Hunter's back, that'll be helpful, but still, they need Jalen badly. I would say defensively, to keep answering the question here a little bit more, it's been a little bit disappointing to me so far defensively in the early going. Not that he's been awful, but I think there's more room to grow and improve for him defensively, given the physical tools that he has and some of the flashes that he's been able to do so far in his career. He is rebounding at an elite level still, which has been a strength of his. I did a 2-part episode with Glenn Willis over the summer. We talked about Jalen in September, I think it was, about all of the stuff that he can do. I think rebounding is an undervalued asset for him defensively. He's great at that. And also his steal rate is a career high right now in a small sample size. I think, though, play-by-play, possession-by-possession, he's not been fantastic defensively. That's an area to improve, to be sure. But he isn't having an incredible start, but it kind of speaks to how good he is that I'm saying that, despite he's been really, really, really productive the last week and a half, 2 weeks. And he's settled in a little bit now, of course. I think he's going to have huge numbers all year long. That's going to be the case. I'm pretty confident in that. And I would say there was a pretty silly reaction in some corners to his early struggles, because I understand it was convenient, the narrative out there. Oh, he signs a big contract. Now he's struggling. That was never going to be real. That was very silly. He's a 22-year-old guy. He wasn't just going to stop trying, all this crazy stuff that I was seeing on social media, whatever. But I think it was a shaky start, to be sure, but he's very good already. He's 22 years old. That was a great contract. I still believe that from the Hawks side, and onward and upward for Jalen. So hopefully that answers the question. I do want to actually, before I move on to something else with regard to David Roddy and some Knicks preview stuff at the end of the show, share some audio with you, or video. I guess it's more audio on the audio side here, but on Jalen Johnson. So Quinn Snyder was actually asked before the Boston game. So again, this is before the Boston game on Monday by Brian Oliver of FanDuel Sports Network, the studio analyst who does the analyst work for Bob Rathman as well. Brian is a really smart basketball guy, for the record. And he actually asked about Jalen. It's like a 2-minute answer, so I'm going to play that for you now. He does kind of reference Jalen's slow start against New Orleans on Sunday, so that's what you hear at the beginning of the answer. But other than that, is not specific necessarily. It's more big picture. I thought it was really interesting about the insight about where Jalen is right now and what the Hawks are trying to emphasize with him along the way. So here's Quinn on Jalen.
After the first 2 games, it seemed like Jalen has found a better rhythm in the last 4. What would you attribute that to overall?
He didn't start out the game with a great rhythm the other night. And to the point that Brian, I think his ability to recognize what are the things, not just for him personally, but in a given game, that are available to him, and not defining himself by whether the ball goes in the basket. He had a great game last night. I think he was 0 for 4 from 3. My thing is you take good ones, and make plays for other people, and make the right reads, and success. Jalen needs to, because he's so unique and so versatile, he has to be sure, and we have to help him with this. I have to help him with stuff we talk about. He has to define success differently than a lot of people do in this league. And the challenge is, and the risk is, that you accept other people's definitions of what success is. And that to me, it's not that those things don't matter, but the arc of Jalen's career, is more variable than that. Right now, he had a possession where he was great defensively. Success is being in a stance. Success is putting your body on somebody and getting a rebound. He can get 12 rebounds, and not get contact in anybody. But one of those rebounds, if he's not aware of that, he can get pushed under the basket, and someone can get an offensive rebound. And so to me, it's more about consistency and all those little things that really don't show up on the stat sheet. Jalen will put stats on the board. I mean, that's great. I'm not telling him we don't want him to rebound or score. But his ability to push the ball in transition, he had a pass the other night where he just caught it with one hand, slung it to the corner and got a guy an open 3. That shot might not go in, so it doesn't show up as an assist. But those are the plays that that he has to continue to make. And the main thing is he's committed to that. He sees the big picture for himself as a player.
All right, and not to farm out all of my answer to Quinn, but I thought it was a pretty interesting answer. And, Quinn's not always the most forthcoming with the media, let's say, as it's been a lot of round and round about DeAndre Hunter and injury updates and specifics and all that stuff. But he was, I think, good on that answer with Jalen. So I want to pass that along to you and a little bit of a window into what the team side believes on their second best player and one of the guys that they're building around long term. All right, more to come in a second when it comes to David Roddy and some Knicks preview content. But first, a word from our partners on the show. Today's show is sponsored by Bilt Rewards. And listen up, renters. You ever feel like you actually are stuck in a loop of rent payments, just watching your money vanish into thin air? It's time to turn that rent game around and start earning some serious rewards. That's where Bilt Rewards comes in. Bilt is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent. Every month, pay your rent and watch the Bilt points roll in. Use points to jet off on a dream vacation. Put your points toward a flight or a hotel stay with 500 plus airlines and 700,000 plus hotels and properties. You can also use your points to book fitness studio classes, redeem them toward a future rent payment. They're designed to meet your lifestyle. Pay rent hassle-free through the Bilt Rewards app. Your rent game just got a major upgrade. Bilt points have also been consistently ranked the highest value point currency by the Points Guy and Bankrate. Earn points by paying rent right now when you go to joinbilt.com/lockedonnba. That's JOINBILT, joinbilt.com/lockedonnba. Make sure to use our URL so that you actually know that we sent you to them. Joinbilt.com/lockedonnba. Start earning points with your rent payments today. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time, and I go to a ton of basketball games. It never gets old to me. The sounds from the court, the buzz in the crowd, it's always fun, and the memories are vivid for me and others, I'm sure. And at Game Time, you can get tickets for all kinds of sporting events, including basketball games and hockey games, and also find tickets for music, comedy, theater, and much more. They have a new feature at Game Time called Game Time Picks. It makes getting tickets also easier and better for you across the board. They filter out all the fluff they actually don't want and show you the incredible deals that you actually do want on great seats, so there's no wasting time with searches of thousands of tickets that you don't actually want. For example, there are awesome deals right now for the Hawks' first NBA Cup home game against the Wizards on November 15th, including a pair of tickets for $15 each, including fees right now at Game Time. That is an awesome deal, of course. There's more of that happening all the time at Game Time. I love the feature personally. It actually allows you to turn things on to view the seats through all-in pricing, so there are no surprise fees when you have that feature enabled at the checkout screen. Also, they have the lowest possible price guaranteed at Game Time, and you can take all of the guesswork out of buying tickets with the Game Time app. Download the Game Time app right now, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account right now at Game Time and use that promo code. It's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app today. What time is it? It's Game Time. All right, and a question from Leon, who says, help me understand how the Hawks can be playing David Roddy this many minutes, but also declining his option and making him a free agent at the end of the season. So I did mention this briefly last week or so, but neglected to kind of dive into it in a full breakdown way because actually it's kind of funny because I was the first person to report this news. So a rare scoop for me. But David Roddy did not have his option picked up by the Hawks. It's a fourth-year team option because he was a first-round pick. The Hawks didn't draft him, but he's still on that contract. It was not a surprise, nor was it a total 100% no-brainer either. He would have paid. It would have been paid about $4.8 million for next season, which the Hawks ultimately chose to basically say that it was too much to guarantee him, which I agree with, by the way. The Hawks can still sign him next year. He's not like forbidden from coming back, but he will be a free agent. He'll be unrestricted on the market, and they cannot pay him. The Hawks cannot pay him more than $4.8 million in the first year of any contract. But I am skeptical that Roddy will get a market above that anyway, and the Hawks, I think, were too at this point. So I think Roddy is the kind of guy who, at the moment, is a league minimum kind of player. He's an NBA player, but maybe not a guy who's going to be making a lot more than that as far as – and there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. And by the way, they can't just match any offer. He is now unrestricted next year. And the Hawks do like him, but as for helping Leon to kind of understand this whole calculus here about why the Hawks are doing this and playing him a lot, the biggest thing is that the Hawks don't want to be playing him this much. And that's not a shot at Roddy, is that they've had so many injuries. So Roddy's been useful this year, I would say. The offense is definitely a little bit better, I think, than people realize coming into the season. He actually is a pretty talented guy with the ball in his hands, a pretty good playmaker for his size. Like he was a point forward in college, et cetera, et cetera. But defensively, it's been considerably worse than you might have thought. And that's been backed up by the eye test and the numbers. Like it's pretty gross on off ratings, He's just not good defensively. That's just what it is. He is an NBA player, but I think that people that I asked around the league about this were not surprised. And basically no one that I talked to was like, yeah, Hawks made a mistake here. Like maybe he has a breakout and he gets a deal worth $5 million a year next year. Good for him. But I'd be surprised to some extent about that. And by the way, here's the thing. If Hunter was available, the Hawks would not be playing Roddy very much. In fact, he got 2 DNPs in the first 2 games of the season with Hunter available. I don't know if he's going to play 0 minutes when Hunter returns, but it's going to be a lot less minutes. Part of that is that Roddy is currently playing the backup 4 minutes, but he probably isn't a backup 4. He's kind of a hybrid forward, but defensively, he's too small to do that. Offensively, kind of limited as a shooter, et cetera, et cetera. But then when Hunter went down, he's their best option in some respects. And I know that Larry Nance could play the 4, and I've been saying this a lot. Like, in fact, I got a question about this that I'll answer kind of quickly now about Nance and Roddy that was basically asking if Quinn Snyder and the staff think that Roddy is better than Nance. And that's not what I'm saying, nor do I believe that that's the case. They're just totally different players. I think Quinn is tending to lean toward the offensive skill set a little bit more. He goes a little bit smaller sometimes on offense. I don't believe that he thinks Larry Nance is a viable power forward. That's my read. He's not said that, but if you go actions over words, like last night's a good example. Monday night, Larry Nance gets a DNP-CD on a night without Hunter. Like, and it's because I don't think they want to play him at the 4. That's just what it seems like to me. And Larry Nance is better than David Roddy. I think considerably so. But I think the Hawks, for me anyway, should probably play Nance at some point at the 4, at least try it a little bit more next to Okongwu in particular. But it's not weird or egregious to play Nance with Hunter out. They just haven't done it so far. And playing Roddy is totally fine as well. Like, I get it. It's not crazy to play Roddy these minutes, given the state of the roster. But when Hunter comes back, limited. And I think that obviously you throw in Dyson missing time so far. I know he's back now, but Bogey being out still, Beat being out still. They're just down bodies, and that kind of led to Roddy playing more than he probably should have. But ideally, he's like the 12th man on this team. I think he and Garrison Matthews are like 11 and 12, 12 and 13, something like that, in that range. They're both playing a lot more than they were supposed to play coming into the year. That's just the nature of the beast. We have injuries, and here we are as of early November. All right, before we get out of here, a little bit of a preview of the Knicks game and an encouraging injury report for the Hawks on Tuesday. Yes, an encouraging injury report. That's been nice. Trae Young left the game, if you missed it, on Monday with what the Hawks called a right rib sprain. He left the game in the third quarter. He is listed as probable for the game on Wednesday. Now, probable does not mean definitely, but Trae being listed as probable is a good sign. Doesn't mean that it does not mean that all is well, but it's better than everything other than being already cleared to play. The Hawks were off today after the back-to-back, so I'm not sure like what kind of analysis they've been doing on his injury, but the fact they were able to list it as probable is a good sign, and hopefully he plays and looks like his normal self on Wednesday. Then DeAndre Hunter, with his right knee, quote-unquote, injury management, is now questionable. He's been out for the last 6 games. He also was ruled out for the sort of the day before the game, the last 4 games in a row. So this is a step in the right direction. The first 2 games he was out, ironically, he was listed as questionable, then downgraded to out. Then he was just out, and now he's questionable again. So he may play on Wednesday. We will see, but it's at least, if nothing else, a step in the right direction for Hunter. And for everybody asking, I have been asking Quinn Snyder and others about this for probably 2 weeks now, and they have given, still to this day, 0 injury updates on DeAndre Hunter. 0. And the listing is weird, just to say that out loud again. Injury management on non-back-to-backs for 6 games in a row is bizarre. They changed the listing from inflammation to injury management. I saw this before. It is very strange. You're not wrong. You're not crazy, fans. Like, I've covered this team for a very long time. This is a very odd injury listing and with no other updates. But we'll see if he's back on Wednesday. Hopefully that's something just minor and they're just trying to take it easy with him or whatever. But Wednesday's a game to circle. And going to this matchup, they could use DeAndre Hunter. I mean, I know Hunter is not the most popular player in Hawksland, but I think, or maybe I hope anyway, that people who are watching these games closely can see Hunter is missed badly at the moment. It's even more so without guys like Veet and without guys like Bogey. Offensively, they miss his shot creation, his shooting ability. And then defensively, like he's not an all-NBA defender, but he is much better than David Roddy defensively. He's much better than Garrison Matthews defensively. Like, the gap there is significant. So they could use him in this matchup against guys like Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby. We'll see if he plays, but big picture, a step in the right direction for Hunter. All right, to the matchup. The Knicks come in on Wednesday. they're actually 3-3 on the year. That's actually tied for the fewest games in the league. So the Hawks have played 8 games, only 6 for the Knicks so far. They actually lost in Houston on Monday. They've not been that impressive. Of course, New York, after their big series of moves this summer, was being lauded quite a bit. They had Karl-Anthony Towns. They had Mikal Bridges, etc. They did, though, I would say, nuke their depth because of all of that. Like Mitchell Robinson was supposed to be a key piece for them. He's hurt right now. And because of that, they're down to like 6 guys, like really 6 guys they actually trust, which is not a lot of depth. Obviously, the Hawks have their own depth challenges right now, but this is the last game of a long road trip for the Knicks as well. That could sometimes be helpful for the Hawks as they face a team that might be tired of being on the road, occasionally get a bad performance at the end of the road trip. Coaches hate the last game of the long trip and the first game after it, because it's just hard to keep your guys up energy-wise at the end of a trip, and then after when you get home, you kind of let down. First game after that's tough too, so could be a small advantage for Atlanta in this game. But still, the Knicks are very good offensively. Top 5 in the league to begin the season. They're leading the league in three-point accuracy so far. They don't take a lot of threes, though. They're actually bottom 5 in volume, which is very bizarre for a team that has Karl-Anthony Towns at center. But they're top 5 in turnover prevention. They don't turn the ball over very well at all. So they're a tough team to guard for sure. Nowhere to hide your guys. Jalen Brunson, I think, got a little bit overrated during last year's playoffs, but he's a really good player nonetheless. Obviously, you have a couple of two-way forwards. You got Cat, who's always tough to guard. So a tough defensive matchup when their guys are playing. When they're benched on the court, it's not so hard, but they're a good team for sure. Defensively, though, they're not particularly impressive. It's not a Tibbs kind of team through that lens. Like they kind of traded in their defense for their offense. Towns at center is not special, to say the least. Brunson's not great defensively. Their forwards are awesome, obviously. Anunoby is a great defender. Bridges is not the same guy he used to be defensively, but he's still totally fine. Josh Hart's a good defender, etc. But they're currently dead last in 2-point shooting allowed. 61%. That's a wild number. Obviously, it's a small sample size, but still, that's tough. They are, though, elite at getting people off the free throw line, so that's something to look at. Opponents are taking fewer than 17 free throw attempts per game against the Knicks, number 1 in the league so far this year. So anyway, there's some strengths there for the Knicks, weaknesses potentially. Ironically, I would say if Trae and Hunter both play, the Hawks are actually deeper than the Knicks, even with all the injuries they have. And they're still without Bogey and Veit and Kobe, which is 3 guys who are projected in their top like 9 or 10 coming into the year. And they're still probably deeper than the Knicks if Hunter plays and if Trae plays. But TBD on that, we won't know for a while. To wrap it up a little bit before we sign off here, the Hawks currently, as of Tuesday night, are 7-point underdogs at home, according to our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. That is actually a pretty big number for what I thought it was going to be. Obviously, there's a little bit of uncertainty with Trae, but he's listed as probable, so I assume he's going to probably play, using that word. If Hunter plays, I think that's a number that's a little bit high. But we'll see how the Hawks perform at this point in time. And obviously, nothing's going to be easy for Atlanta coming up. They have some at least the frequency of games is going to be a little bit less now for a little while. They do play on Friday and Saturday in a back-to-back. Then after that, they have 1 game in like 5 days. So they only have 4 games in the next 9 days. Not so bad compared to their early season rampage of games. So I'll be in the building for this one on Wednesday, as I always am at home. So please stay tuned. And I'm actually going to be heading to Detroit with the Hawks for their game on Friday. So that'll be fun to just go to be on the scene up there against a pretty interesting Pistons team. Anyway, that's all I have on today's podcast, sort of in this off day malaise for people. I know people wanted some content today, so here we are stepping in, and I'll have more to come, of course, after the game on Tuesday. Please subscribe to this podcast. Anywhere you find your podcast, just search Locked on Hawks on Apple, on Spotify, on Overcast. We're also on YouTube. Please like the video as you're watching it there. Subscribe, enable your notifications, tell your friends, leave comments, etc., etc. Please follow the show on Twitter at Locked on Hawks. Follow me there at BT Rowland, and follow my non-podcast work at patreon.com/BT Rowland. I appreciate everybody listening to the podcast. And again, I'll be back in about, 30 hours or so, something like that. Late night Wednesday into Thursday with more on the podcast. And we'll see you all next time.